before the show we were like, talk about Lance with him not here is kind of shady.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, but it is what it is. I told him he was in a cult. Like in the after show, for those that didn't see it, I asked him, here we go. I asked him, I'll try and keep it family friendly. If you engage in adult relations with a trans woman who's male and has male body parts, are you gay? He said, no. And I said, if you were to go to MGM National Harbor, and the reason why I use it as an example is, for one, it's obvious, like I was just there last weekend, but it's like a big shopping center with like a steakhouse and restaurants and casino. And you proclaim loudly to the thousands of people that position, that engaging in adult relations with a male who is trans is not gay. Do you think any of them would agree with you? And he's like, no, none of them would. I'm like, you're in a cult. Like, you're asserting this worldview that exists only among a tiny, tiny subset of people. You are the odd person out. You are not the mainstream. You are not the average.
Well, to be fair, the commenters were pointing this out in the members only section. When he made that statement, he was drinking Bud Light. So it's possible it got into his system, and that's why he said that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Very true. I will say, I do respect him for coming on the show. I didn't think when I saw his face up there, I was like, there's no way Lance actually accepted going on Timcast. So full respect, full props to you, Lance, for doing that.
He tweeted something at someone, I don't remember who, and then I responded with just like, hey, come on the show, bro. And immediately he was like, hell yeah, dude, awesome. And I was like, cool. And the thing that these leftists don't understand, and he's a self-proclaimed leftist, I'm not trying to insult him, is that I have no fear of having a conversation with a leftist because I only seek to follow a logical pathway towards betterment. So when it comes to my politics, it's simply, is there something I missed? Give me the study that proves me wrong. I'd like to hear it. He couldn't do it. When I mentioned that trans kids desist at 61 to 98%, there were 2 studies that show this. The only thing you could say is a meta-analysis of studies disproves this. And I said, a meta-analysis is the opinion of a researcher who read articles, not a scientific study. You have to give me, he couldn't give me one study.
I think the problem when you're having these debates is there's so many other factors beyond like, oh, well, I showed him the study. It's like, no, lots of times people are thinking like, this is my friendship group, my social circle, my job. I have so much more on the line to reaffirm the case I've put forward, even if they're making me potentially look stupid, than I do to sit here and be like, oh, that's actually interesting. Realize that. You can't overcome that.
That's the thing about Timcast. That doesn't exist here. It exists in conservative circles. Not mostly, though. Like, I would say there exists a small tendency, because tribalism exists on the right as on the left. The left is overwhelmingly, I have to say this for my social circles. Yeah. The right is, there are certain lines I won't cross because of my social circles. But here at Timcast, Ian can go on a rant about fake Jews and usury, and we just roll our eyes, and like the conversation exists. Like, I'm not going to pretend to be conservative for conservatives or liberal for liberals. Yeah. Like, if Lance or any leftist comes to me and says, here's proof you're wrong, I'll say, I have nothing to say. What am I supposed to say other than I was wrong?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to be wrong if I don't have to be. So if you can show me valid information that says that my worldview is incorrect about something, please pass that on. I think there's a very apt quote here. Voltaire did not say very many wise things. He was pretty terrible. But he once made a great point. He said, those who can get you to believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Yeah. Ironically, that applies to Voltaire and what he taught people and how they acted in the French Revolution. However, when you look at Lance, he seems like a perfectly nice guy. He came onto the show. He was very polite to everybody, but he believes in absurdities, and the policy he wants to implement is atrocious as a result.
I'll give you an example. He thinks a pregnant woman should not be allowed to do meth because it would intentionally kill a child, but that if she goes to a doctor and requests the doctor intentionally kill the child, that's allowed. Well, that is a logical, moral inconsistency. And
it was just interesting because sitting across from him as I was speaking to him, it felt like this was somebody who shouldn't believe these insane things. He doesn't come off as somebody who, if you encountered on the streets, would go, let's kill babies, let's mutilate children. But he's bought into an ideology that essentially forces him to hold those positions. And it's really sad. It's really sad.
I'll never forget. I've been in a few situations where I've been around some pretty radical, crazy people while I was traveling the world. And there was one house that I went to, and they had a baby there, and they were like some gun-toting crazies. But I was looking at that baby, and I'm like, this kid is probably going to be radicalized into this group as well. Like they're going to be not. I love guns, by the way, but but I mean, with the crazy ideology, it kind of makes it different. But anyways, I was like, this baby who's like a perfectly lovely little being, no matter what, they're probably headed on this trajectory to have the same beliefs as their parents, their community, everything else. And that's what when you talk about like Lance having these beliefs, I wonder what set of events happened in his life that led him to that position. And what set of events could occur that would ever make him change his mind. I think this is one of the greatest debates we have right now, is like how much of our ideology is heritable, how much of it is environment, and how much is this reversible.
You mentioned this before the show, and I was thinking about it, 'cause we talk about nature versus nurture. And I think it's a mix of nature versus nurture. But I don't think it's the politics you inherit. I think it's the social characteristics. I believe that Lance is of a genetic predisposition towards social conformity. And so that is to say, I believe that there are some people who are predisposed more so towards following the crowd, and some people who are predisposed to reject the crowd. And I think there's good reasons why that exists in human psychology. I don't think it's absolute. I think someone who is of a family genetic line that is predisposed towards being a follower could absolutely be a leader, because I think these things are only a small faction, small factor. But I think there's a good reason why they exist in humanity, in terms of human development and how societies form and function. There is great benefit to following the crowd in a crisis and disaster. If you took a bunch of leftists, gave them their authority figure, a crisis happened, you do need, in certain emergencies, quick executive action. And you need everyone to fall in line. At the same time, if everyone falls in line, you commit atrocities, your system will break down. So there's a balance between the leader, like people resisting the establishment, people in favor of it. There has to be a balance.
Yeah. Well, I would also add this, and this is probably the last thing I'll say about Lance, and I don't think it's some like horrible thing that I wouldn't say to his face by any means, so I'm comfortable saying it here.
You thought he smelled bad?
Yeah, absolutely. Just horrible. No, he really, there's this idea of the banality of evil, how someone who is an otherwise decent person can participate in just morally entirely unacceptable behavior, right? And promoting this stuff on a national level with a public platform is absolutely horrible. He's doing a lot of damage, but it's so strange because he doesn't strike me as someone who is intending to act maliciously. He's just very confused. And I don't know how to convince somebody like that, but it's certain that what he's doing has massive negative effects on the real world, to the point where it could seriously harm children.
Authority. That would convince them. And so a social authority, right? The idea that you are on the right side of history. There's that viral clip going around now of Taylor Swift, and she was like, I need to be on the right side of history.
Oh, yeah.
Right, she's wrong. But think about it this way. There's an invasion. China storms the beach of California or whatever, and then starts moving very quickly across the United States, taking over countries. You can't now have like a committee sit down and have a logical conversation, or like you need executive action. You need someone to be like, I got a plan. Here's what we got to do. Please do it. Now, if you have 100 people that are social conformist, and the leader comes in and says, we face an existential threat, trust me and do this thing. You start building walls. You start getting guns. If they just say, I'm going to fit in and do it, that's a huge net benefit to your society. But when you get to the point where there are evil people in charge and corruption, people who seek to only extract value, those followers become zombies marching behind a corrupt institution.
Yeah, I would mostly agree with that. And I'd add something else. You brought up a very key phrase here, the right side of history. We hear this constantly. I want to be on the right side of history. What you're essentially saying is, long after I am dead, I will still be seeking the approval of others. It's a very sad way of looking at the world. And I'll also add that if you have eternity in mind, being on the right side of history is a very small, petty ambition. You should be trying to get to heaven. You should be trying to be on the side of truth, not the side of whoever's going to end up writing books 200 years from now if they happen to remember whatever small political movement you're a part of.
I saw the other day that Tucker text leak where he's talking about kind of rediscovering his empathy, watching this video of a Antifa guy getting the shit beat out of him. And he's like, oh, this is actually a human being. I shouldn't want this guy to be killed, even though I had that spur of feeling. And I retweeted it and basically said, you know, how are people crapping on Tucker for showing this moment of amazing humanity? And some guy replied, this is why the right always loses. Why are you taking this position, Lauren? We should want our enemies dead. And you never want to win the war or the battle. And I was thinking exactly that. I'm like, mate, you've already lost the battle, the one that matters for your soul.
Yeah.
Like that's the battle that matters. Not to say that there aren't these political fights that we can have and try to have victories in, but if you've lost your soul and you've become just like the people you're trying to fight, what's the point of it all?